folks, I'm Lucy at Ballyhoo Creations, where I design dolls, puppets, plushies, and things like that that are made in the hoop with an embroidery machine, or I also have some sewing patterns out there too. In this video tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make an art doll rather than a play doll for children. This is not made for children because it has wire in it to make it poseable, and they can do all different shapes, and that's one of the things that makes it an art doll for home decor or holiday decor. I've got a home tour coming up pretty soon for the Christmas holidays, winter holidays, and I'm going to have these in different like poses and antics and things, so you can see examples of how you could use them around your home. There are a couple of different faces and heads that come with this design, but you could also mix and match different heads and bodies. The body is made in a 6x10 hoop, so you would need a 6x10 to do the body, and then the heads are made in a 4x4 hoop, and they just pop on like that in different ways, and you can mix and match them with different faces. I've got all kinds of designs out there. Okay, so let's jump in, start making some elves. I've gone ahead and run the placement stitch, or the first color or stitch order for the body, and this is for a 6x10 hoop, and you can see that it actually has the word fold. Let me flip that around to make it a little easier for you to see the word fold here on one side, and that means that we need to place the folded fabric on that line. Now, you also, if you have some stretch to your fabric, you want that to be going across the way this stretch arrow right here shows. This is the direction of stretch. This is your body, obviously, and then this corner right here is actually where the hat is going to be stitched. So you want right sides together, place it on the fold, just like that, and make sure that all those placement stitches are covered. I'm going to actually, if you want, here's a little tip, if you go a little bit beyond the fold, because we've got some room over here, make sure that thumb is being covered, and that will make the hat a little bit wider, so if you want it to sit down a little lower on their face, you could do that. We'll put it on the machine. You can use a single needle, a multi-needle, it doesn't matter what kind of machine you use as long as it can handle a 6x10 hoop. The body is all stitched. I've done it in a black thread here so that you can see it very clearly, and we're ready to take that out of the hoop. We'll just put that aside and we'll do the trimming and turning in a little bit. I've got my placement stitch on my stabilizer. This is cutaway stabilizer this time. Like before, we used the mesh, and I've got this little arrow that shows me the direction of stretch for the head. Now, we don't want both pieces of our fabric, we just want one piece of the face fabric, and put that down to cover all those placement lines and make sure the stretchy direction of the fabric matches your little arrow. Just smooth that out and put that on the machine. Okay, I've stitched out the head, and at this point I want to add a little bit, just tiny amounts of stuffing into the nose and the chin, and I'm also going to do the cheeks. You don't have to, but you can. This is an optional step, but it really, I think, adds a lot to the finished project. Let's get that stuffing, and tweezers or hemostats are probably going to be necessary to really squeeze it down in there. And I like to get it all the way down. You want to push that stuffing down because if it's up here at the top, that'll be a completely different look. And this little opening here in the side of the face is so that you can get some stuffing into the chin. And if you want to stuff the cheeks, you'll probably need to get rid of some of these little placement stitches. This one, that's going to be pretty hard to sneak in. And if you want to do the cheeks, I'll show you how to do that. Just clip a few of the little placement threads or tack down stitches here. Those are not needed. Be very careful with this. Now this is optional, you don't have to do this step, but I see that a lot of people who make these dolls that I design, they like to do this. So I'm just giving you some more options and get something really customized. Just going to smooth my fabric out, and now we're ready for the back of the head. And again, making sure that the stretchiest direction is the same as we did before. Put that right side down. With this cotton jersey, it really doesn't matter right side, wrong side. You can barely tell. And then back to the machine. The seam for the head is all stitched. We're ready to take it out of the hoop, and we'll move on to our trimming and turning. Everything is stitched. We're ready to go ahead and start cutting things out here. So I'm just going to get rid of my excess stabilizer and save that piece for later. And if you look at the back, you'll see that the placement stitches as well as the tack down have a little bit of outline, and if you cut around just to the outside of that, you'll be right where you need to be. I need to make sure that I'm getting all of my layers cut here. Now don't cut this bottom stitch here. Just cut to the outside of that line, and that'll give you the right amount of seam allowance for this stretch fabric. The head is mostly cut out. Now we need to make sure that we clip these inside corners right around the ears. And on this one, I like to turn it over because I like to be able to see exactly where my seam is. You want to clip right up to that seam line, but don't actually cut the threads. Same on the top of the ear. And make sure you get both ears. So you want to clip almost to that stitch line, but make sure you don't actually cut your stitches there. We're going to move on to the body, and with the body, be careful with the hat, because remember there's a hat right here on this fold, so don't cut through that. And if you turn it over to the other side where you can still see the placement stitches on the stabilizer, that's your cutting line. So it is kind of hard to see, but if you look closely, you'll see that this is the seam of the hat right here, and then there's a line just about a 1/4 inch away from it, and that's our cut line for the hat. Let's do that first. Don't cut the seam line. It is a little bit tricky, but after you watch the video, and just remember that's a little tricky spot, so don't mess up on that. Do not cut this line right here for the hat. We need to leave the fold intact. That's very important. And then this line here at the bottom, you can go ahead and use that to cut out your hat at the bottom for the brim. And the rest of the stabilizer we don't actually need, so we can cut that away. Just leave it in the seam, it's fine. Okay, there's our hat cut out. And now it's easier, you can go ahead and cut out the body. We'll speed through this. Again, you can use the placement line that's just outside of the seam. That's your cutting line. Now we have a few inside corners on the body that we also need to make sure we clip the curves. So here between the legs, I want to go almost like an X shape, get right up next to that seam on both legs. And then we also need to clip here at the neck. And again, it's easier to see it on the side without the stabilizer. both sides of the neck. You need to clip next to that thumb, both sides, and under the arms, and I already got pretty close under there, but just make sure that's really close to the seam in that armpit area. We've got between the legs, this little right in front of the foot. Go ahead and clip that. And again, you're clipping almost to the seam, just don't cut your threads. If you do accidentally cut your threads, you can use either a needle and thread or a little bit of glue to fix that. So all of the pieces have been cut out, and one more thing to cut on the body. You notice that there is no opening for turning this. That's on purpose, because the way that we're going to do it is we're actually going to lift one piece of the body fabric. So I've got the front and back here. Make sure that that's out of the way, and I'm going to do a little clip here right in the center just to get the hole started, and I'm going to cut just one layer of fabric from the neck down almost to the legs. See how that's done? And now I've got a nice big opening for turning and stuffing. And we're going to cover this up later on with our trim and embellishment, so you will never even see that this is there. That's why this design has this little step where you have to cut the front opening. Now we're ready for turning. And I advise always, of course, use the hemostats, and this is a nice pair for this size. Always start with the smallest parts and turn them in, like the thumb. Get that just pulled into the hand first before you turn the hand. If you do the hand first and then try to do the thumb, it's going to be very difficult. I have a whole video on how to turn small parts if you're brand new to this. But for this video, I will give you some tips. That neck pulled through, because that's a small part too. Go back and again, thumb. I'm just opening the jaws of the hemostats and pushing the fabric into them, and then pull through. And when you pull, the way that I think it works really well is squeeze at the very tip. You don't want to squeeze down here and try to pull. That's not going to work. You need to squeeze all the way at the tip, and then just do it very slowly and pull it through. Fleece actually turns right side out pretty easily. That's another reason why fleece is recommended for this, and stretch fabrics as well. That little bit of stretch gives you extra turning room. The feet can be a little frustrating, I'm not going to lie to you. Got to take your time to get that toe started. And once you feel it pull through, then you're home free. And again, way at the tip. And another tip that I give is, if you get your hand wet, it's just like counting money. If you have a little bit of sweat or moisture on your hand, you get more traction. Same thing goes with turning. And I'm also going to use my hemostats to push out those seams. Get those ankles, heels turned, get everything nice and fluffed up. There should be a thumb in there somewhere. It didn't get turned all the way. There we go. Now you can see that I have some thread showing, and I used black so that you could see it on the video tutorial, but you would want to use a thread color that matches your fabric, and that would barely be visible. If you can see a lot of thread here in your seams, that means that your machine's tension is too loose. And I know a lot of machines, people think, oh, my tension's perfect because I can do a satin stitch and it looks exactly the way it's supposed to. Satin stitches have a looser tension than running stitches for our seams. So you might find, and this is not just with my design, there's nothing in digitizing that controls the tension, by the way. That is all in the machine. So if you're noticing in the hoop projects, if you have a lot of stitch showing there, then tighten up your tension. Okay, the body's done. The hat is very easy with these little hemostats. Just get that pulled through. And for the head, same thing. The ears can be a little on the tricky side. This is not the largest opening. but because we're using a stretch fabric, that gives us a little bit of extra give, and it makes it easier to turn. That's another reason why stretch fabric is really required for this design. And there she is. I'm calling this one a girl. A lot of the elf heads can be, they can go either way, depending on how you decide to embellish them with their hair and their outfits. But I'm going to call this one a girl. I'm going to try to make her look girly. We'll see if that goes well. I'm getting her ears all the way turned out. Same thing with that area of the head there. Okay. There we go. So all of the parts are turned, body, hat, head. And we're ready to move on to the assembly step. Assembling includes putting the armature wire in, stuffing both the head and the body, and then we'll close up the body. We'll attach the head and we'll embellish with a little bit of trim and things like that, adding the hat and the hair. So to insert the armature, I'm going to flatten out the feet, make sure they're flat, put that into the body, and right when you get down to the bottom, you have to make sure that they switch around, because we want the flat part of that foot to go on the flat part of the fabric foot. And then you can bend the foot back again and have the heel just pop in. There we go. And the feet are actually going to turn around like this. So even though there's a side seam, it's going to be the top and bottom seam of the foot. Same thing on the other side. And then he puts the arms in. And just bend it and have that neck area just dive into the neck. Then straighten it back up again. The armature is in there. I'm going to add a little bit of stuffing. You don't need to stuff very much because you already get a lot of shape just by adding that armature wire. I'm going to put a little in the upper arms, quite a bit in the torso, and a little in the upper legs. And hemostats, again, not just for turning, they're also great for stuffing and getting the stuffing right down where you want it. And we'll speed through this section. You don't need to watch how slowly I stuff. I want to make sure I stuff both the front and the back of this armature, so just tucking little pieces underneath the armature in the front and the back. Just feeling around for any empty parts, places that need more stuffing. When I bend the arms, I want to make sure that they bend in a decent place. I can tell I need some more right here in the front. I'm ready to close this up. You don't want to overstuff it. It'll be really hard to close that. We're going to hand stitch this. I've already got my needle and thread. And I'm using, this is a crewel needle. It's longer and it's a little thicker than a typical needle, a little easier to navigate. And I've got two pieces, and this is a strong thread, a heavy-duty thread, and it's doubled over and knotted. Just start, you can start from top or bottom, it doesn't matter. And again, this seam will be covered by the lapel. And by the way, we needed to keep a little piece of our fabric. Keep a little scrap of fabric for the lapel. I forgot to mention that earlier, but you should have just little cut pieces, and we'll use that for the lapel that's going to cover up this seam. I'm going to use the ladder stitch. There's a diagram in your instructions on how this works. And the ladder stitch just goes across. Take a little stitch, anywhere from 1/8 to 1/4 inch stitch, and then back across the other way. You just take little bites, vertically on each side and then go across horizontally. I'll speed through this. If you need more instruction on the ladder stitch step by step, you can look at my video called Hand Stitches for Doll and Puppet Making. Okay, that was the ladder stitch all the way up, and I'm going to do a little knot at the top. I'm just going to take a tiny little stitch, and I've made a loop, pass the needle through, which leaves you with another loop, pass the needle through that second loop. Now when you pull up on the thread, and you may need to use your needle to keep this from getting knotted up, but when you pull up on the thread, you'll get a knot right at the surface. That's what we want. And now I can just bury my needle and thread inside the doll somewhere. Come out the other side, cut it close to the surface, and that thread will disappear inside. So the body is done. This is again the back side. This is the front side. Actually, I need to turn the feet around. And you can still do that, and it won't hurt anything. Because we're going to add a little lapel right here on the front. I'm going to go ahead and stuff the head. Same as before, you want to use smaller wads of stuffing. I don't like to stuff the ears. I like to leave those as they are, and you can even, if you can get a little bit of glue inside the ear to glue it closed, that is a nice look as well. Now this neck area right here is actually a turning tab that you can turn inside. And we're just going to fold it out of the way. Makes it easier to stuff. I've got quite a bit of stuffing in that head already, but I still want to check and make sure that there's not any areas that are little areas that need a little more stuffing in there. Like this part of the face right here could use a little bit more. And that's why I like having the hemostats. You can add very small bits just where you want them. Okay, and I'm not going to stuff the neck area because we're actually going to turn that inside. You could go ahead and put it on this way. That's one way of doing it, but I like to have it where this turning tab is inside the neck, and to do that, because I've got stuffing, I just poke my hemostats down and just kind of open them up and make a hole in that stuffing. And then try to get that turning tab up inside there. That little stitch where the chin is, we want to get it turned so that you don't see anything below that. See how that works? She's got a nice dimension with her cheeks, her nose, her chin, and that's going to fit on top of the body that way. Let's get her lapel added first, and I'm just taking a scrap that I had left over. You want about 1/2 inch. This is a little thicker than I want it, but you want it to go from just under the chin down to cover your seam, down between the legs right there. Okay, now I can get rid of the scraps. So that's going to go right there. And again, I think this is too thick. I'm going to make it a little bit thinner. This is personal choice though. You can make it the thickness that you want. It's just supposed to look like a little lapel, and we'll add buttons to it later. Okay, just a little glue. You could hand stitch it if you really wanted to, but I have found I like glue for this. You could also stitch the buttons onto this before you glue it on, or you could glue on the buttons too. Once you've glued it on though, it's really hard to stitch through the glue. To put hair on the head, and you notice I have not attached the head yet because I want to go ahead and work with the head without the body. It makes it a little bit easier. I'm going to take some faux fur, and this I'm going to use the gluing method because it's pretty quick and easy. I'm going to glue a little bit in the front. So just cut a little piece, and I'm going to use my small scissors, and I'm going to try to cut just the backing and not the actual fur. So how big do I need this? Let's see. To right there. There are several different ways you can do doll hair. I have a video series that shows you a bunch of different ways, including yarn, including faux fur. You could even use mohair locks if you're into more of that. You know, a lot of art dolls use that. Her to have a little part in the middle. And again, I'm trying to cut the backing and not the fur so that I'll still have some fur hanging down like this, like natural hair would. Put that on, just glue it down, and then I'm going to trim off the excess. And I'll do the same thing for the back side. Okay, her hair is now glued on, a little faux fur wig. And if you want, in my case I do want to, I want to trim a little bit of hair away because I really want to show off her little ears. It's kind of what makes her a special little elf. If you have longer faux fur, you could do the same thing. Just give them a haircut. Now for the hat, I like to put a little bell at the end. I've got my pipe cleaner. I'm going to hook it through the bell. Just give that a little twist so it's locked in there. And the hat should have a little hole in the top. That was part of the design. If you weren't quite on the fold, you may not have that hole, but it should have a hole at the very top so that you can add some kind of embellishment. So if I put the pipe cleaner down through there and get the bell right on it, and I like to glue it so I know it won't come away. There we go. Now you can just loop the bottom of the pipe cleaner around on itself. That'll sit on the top of the elf head, and make sure you don't have a sharp point here, so bend that over. You want the seam in the back. I'm just going to start gluing that down. And we're going to have some trim to cover this up, so I'm not going to try to make it too perfect. And that pipe cleaner makes it scrunch down nice. There we go. Still got faux fur all over the place. That is one of the joys of working with fur. We are almost there. All we have left is attaching the head and adding the trim. Okay, I'm going to show a stitched way of attaching the head, and this is optional. You could just, honestly, a lot of them that I do, I just put the head on and it's a friction fit. It's on there pretty tightly, and you can swivel their head around, but if you're going to have it where people are going to be messing with it, kids are going to be picking it up. By the way, this is not a child's toy. I've said that before, but I would not give a doll with a wire armature to a small child. That's just not safe. But even if they're picking it up, moving the head around, you know, the head's going to come off. So it's up to you. You can stitch it down. I've got my needle and thread, and I like to use a thread color that closely, or it's kind of more like the skin color than the body color. And it doesn't really matter where you start, but just do a little running stitch around the edge. Okay, I've gone all the way around the bottom of the head. I want to make sure that the thread tails are poked in. Put the head on, and then pull on that thread, and that makes it tighten up around the neck. Now you could either do a ladder stitch or just a few stitches here to keep it in place, but I'm going to do one more thing now that I know how tight I need it. I'm going to tie a little knot. Okay, I'm just going to run this through the body, and you're not going to see this top of the neck because it's going to be buried in the head. I'm actually going to poke my needle through the loop of the end of the thread, and now I've got a nice knot there. Get rid of any excess. Okay, and to attach that head, I'm going to run my needle up, trying to get it past this fabric right here and up into the stuffing, kind of under the hat. It's better to do this before the hat goes on. I wasn't thinking of that. Okay, put that on. Okay, so now I've got it attached from the top of the neck up through the head. And if I tie a knot up here, that's going to keep it on. And that is hidden underneath the hat. So now what we've got is the head is on there. It's not, it may come off, but at least it's not going to be flying across the room. It's still on there, but you have all the range of motion. So you can have the head tilt, kind of look down. You can pose the head a lot better with that method. All we have left is to add the trim, and this goes pretty quickly with a glue gun. Got a little fur trim left over, that's fine. We are done. If you want to, you could also add a little bit of fur at the top for a little pom-pom. She is all put together, and the last step on any doll assembly is the cleanup step. I've got glue, I've got extra fibers, I've got glue strings from the glue gun, lint, all that kind of stuff. So a tape roller or a lint brush is always a good idea to go ahead and clean up. Now I realize that a lot of you may have never made a poseable doll before, and getting them to pose and stand up on their own can be tricky if you don't know what to do. But if you know what to do, it's actually pretty easy. Remember, we have that wire in the bottom and it was kind of a paper clip shape. You need to make sure that that paper clip is pressed down flat to your surface. Both of the feet need to be flat, and you may feel a bump in it and you'll feel it flatten out. And then once that's done, you go ahead and just kind of bend it forward and backward until you find the balance point. And that's actually pretty good on this one. Well, it's pretty forward, so we can bend her back a little bit. You can also bend the knees. Get them to squat a little bit. It's a little more sturdy that way. Of course, you can bend the arms in all different kinds of poses. And that's all there is to it. So go out and make your own elves with your embroidery machine. If you want, you can join our Facebook group called Ballyhoo Inspiration and Support. I'll link to it down in the description box. You can ask questions if you run into any problems, or you could share your, show and tell your new design and show it off so that everybody can tell you how great it is. That's cool too. So that's all I have for now. Go make some elves. I'll see you later, folks.
Thank you.